Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly. Sunderland are off to Wembley again. Hello everyone and welcome back to the ROKER RAPPORT podcast, where for some reason for the Checker Trade Trophy build-up we had a really sort of fancy outgoing intro, but yet when we're going to Wembley when it really matters we're just doing a standard pod, go figure. I don't know what on earth my priorities are, but apparently the Checker Trade Trophy was worth a lot more preparation than this. Regardless of that, I'm absolutely thrilled to announce here on this podcast today that Sunderland have beaten Portsmouth 0-0. And go through on aggregates. All that's important is that we have beaten Portsmouth and we are going to Wembley. So I'll jump straight into the 3-word review, or rather the 4-word review, given that I like to add another word on when we end up playing well, and here they are. Magic Matthews says Lee Catamole. SAFC North Yorkshire says it's all or nothing. It's the hope I can't stand, say time to avenge Charlton. Graham Field says ending the Wembley jinx. Kieran Lawrence says pod out on time. Yeah, well, to be honest, probably not, no. I'm going to just say this now.
Please gamble responsibly.
John Ollier says, my son deserves this. Ryan SAFC says, train packed like sardines. Phil SAFC 73 has two, but I'm going to say them all. So we've got Rhythm is a dancer, Ozturk is the answer. Brilliant. Love it. Sunderland Till I Die says, Jesus of Nazareth legend. Dave B says, Wembley, wife says no. Devastating. Leanne Fisher says, heart can't take it. Richard says, will McGeady be fit? Robert Barber says, don't book opera tickets. Michael Bowers says, one final push, please. And Dave Pick says, perfect, disciplined player performance. So I'll give the briefest of summaries about that game because we all essentially know what's happened. And as far as events go, the only thing that we really need to know is that Sunderland were resolute throughout the game and ground out a very respectable 0-0 draw against a Portsmouth team who still weren't really bearing the fangs and ultimately couldn't break us down. Which means that overall we go through an aggregate with a 1-0 win, as we said, with draw number 20 of the season, which is absolutely tremendous. We will go to Wembley and we will play Charlton, who just managed to scrape past Doncaster on penalties. Now I think I'll get into who I'm joined in the studio with today. So on my right, I've not got Johnny as usual. I've got Josh. How you doing, Josh? Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm very well. This feels a little different because usually I come in and have a bit of a critique of players. Right. But having recently played on the pitch at the Stadium Light, and I'll be honest, I wasn't very good.
No?
And it's not as easy as it looks. So I don't feel like I have the right to... so I might be very positive today.
If Jimmy was to do the player ratings on you, what do you think he'd give you?
Optimistic 5.
Optimistic 5?
Yeah.
What, so he'd be wrong again, basically?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jimmy. I'm also joined by Morgan, who is making a rare appearance on the podcast. Not a regular, but he's here nonetheless. How you doing, Morgan?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm all right. Thanks for asking. It's always nice when people are considerate. Johnny and Josh never ask me how I am.
Well, to be honest, I didn't really mean it. It's just a good space filler, isn't it? So
True. Fair enough. I admire the honesty, if nothing else. And our final guest is Scott Wilson from the Northern Echo. How you doing, Scott?
I'm very well. Nice to be here, yeah.
Oh, it's nice to have you in here. How you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm a long trek down to Portsmouth, long trek back, but certainly worthwhile because, like you say, got the job done.
Absolutely. So let's talk a bit about the Portsmouth game now then, as it's quite obviously the sole focus of today's podcast. It was a very, very solid, very professional performance, I believe. Not the most glamorous of the season by a long shot, but ultimately we got the job done. So we're going to go to you, Morgan, to start with. What did you make of the game? Give us your initial thoughts after you watched it.
Well, from Thursday's game, it's positive because I think that we're now starting to bear the fruits that everybody's criticised Jack Ross of this season, which is we've probably not been ruthless enough in games and killed teams off over the last two games, but obviously certainly Thursday night we did the right thing, which was to be tight, keep a clean sheet. And obviously, as I said, that system is one that worked for us. It's not one that I would want to see us use on Sunday, but it worked very well against the Portsmouth team we've obviously struggled against. That's only 1 victory in 5 this season. So, very positive, good performance, some really good individual performances as well. The likes of Ozturk coming in, again, after a red card, mentally getting right for that. Cattermole and Leadbitter, absolutely solid, especially in the circumstances for Leadbitter as well. I'm sure you'll get onto that later. But yeah, just an all-round professional performance. And I think we've got to be really confident now going into Sunday, because we've turned the tide from the last 2 regular games of the season, 2 defeats, to 2 clean sheets. Couldn't be more positive, really.
I think individual performances definitely shone through, with the likes of Cattermole, Leadbitter, Ozturk being very notable examples. Was anyone for you a particular standout, Scott?
I think probably the lads you've named. I mean, Cattermole and Leadbitter, for me, were the key to the game, because, the first 10, 15 minutes, you felt if Portsmouth had really got a head of steam up, got the crowd really going, you thought that, this could be a difficult night for someone. And it just didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen is because from the word go, Cattermole and Leadbitter just sat there in front of the back four, said, okay, come on to us, and try and get round us, and we'll just stop you. And they did. They kept it simple. They kept the ball, and they just prevented Portsmouth from getting any kind of early momentum. And from that point onwards, Portsmouth were just, was surprisingly flat. At no stage did you get the kind of 10, 15 minutes of the kind of Alamo that you thought at some stage it's just going to be all hands to the pump. And it never really happened. And it never really happened because Sunderland was so well organised and so well drilled. And as Morgan's alluded to, I think you've got to give Jack Ross a bit of credit for getting that selection right. Because it was a fairly bold call to bring Grant in and play him alongside Lee. He hasn't done that an awful lot this season. I'm sure had it gone wrong, he would have got a lot of criticism for it, but it went right. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. I think it's always a case of, you could say, but if it went wrong, he'd have got stick for it. But ultimately, it didn't. He didn't get it wrong.
Yeah.
It was the right decision, and therefore it didn't go wrong. I think that's as fair as anything. What do you make about that, Josh? What did you make of the Cattermole Leadbitter partnership? Because we saw it early doors when Leadbitter signed a few times, but we haven't seen it much since. It worked very well against Portsmouth, and it kept them quiet.
Yeah, well, I really liked the 4-3-2-1 formation that he had.
Was it not 4-2-3-1?
Was it not 4-3?
I think on Thursday it was probably more 4-2-3-1. Yeah, right. I think Cattermole and Leadbitter sat, and then Power was probably more advanced with obviously Honeyman moving out wide. I mean, he has played 4-3-2-1 at times, but I think it was definitely more of a 2 than a 3 than a 1 on Thursday.
Too notable.
What I liked about it though is that the midfielders were coming out wide to help the fullbacks. A lot has always been said of Portsmouth's trident, behind the striker, of kind of Pittman, who I was really worried about coming back, because I thought they really missed him in the first leg. We kept him very quiet, and as you could tell from that awful video of how he talked to the ball boy, he got very frustrated.
I was going to say, Johnny, Johnny, you're called Josh, not Johnny.
Yeah.
I'm too used to the man on my right being Johnny.
So we're all Jays.
Yeah,
we're all Jays.
We're all Jays, well, apart from me. But yeah, I was going to say, Brett Pittman, we didn't really keep him quiet, because as you could clip from Sky Cameras, he had a right go at the ball boy, of all people.
Yeah.
So he clearly got very frustrated by that. And I just thought we kept all of them very quiet. Even when Jamal Lowe came on, I was like, here we go. I barely noticed him in the last 20, 25 minutes or whatever it was.
He was a surprise to me that he didn't start, because I know he hadn't played well in the first leg, but he played ever so well at Wembley. And whenever I've seen Portsmouth play well this season, he's generally been their brightest spark. So I was surprised he didn't play. And then you're right, when he came on, he kind of offered nothing, because Sunderland had shut them down so well to that point that all the kind of momentum had gone from them already.
Yeah. But, talking about individual performances, I think McLaughlin and Maguire deserve a massive notice as well. McLaughlin, for obvious reasons, player of the match, on Fratton Park, makes massive saves. And I think just defensively, as a back four, when you've got someone that confident, and he's so good at coming and getting crosses and stuff like that you just have such faith in him. And Maguire obviously for the goal, but I think what Maguire is so good at is getting in people's heads and getting in people's faces. And Portsmouth seemed from the start, very they were very cool and collected. I just think having someone like Maguire, who is clearly a bit of a wind-up merchant, is because of that.
That's the nice word. You describe that category of player.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not one to use bad language on a podcast, but there's another word we often use to describe people like Chris Maguire, especially in League One. But I think what you make there is a very good point. I think Maguire is very good at getting in people's heads, and I think what Portsmouth would have wanted to do prior to this game was to use their home atmosphere to get into our heads and perhaps to create. I mean, they kept banding the term cauldron around on social media, but it was if that was a cauldron, then its contents were very still, because I didn't see much of. I mean beyond the 50-year-old father who stuck a boot in Luke 09 when he fell over there.
And Mick Hucknall. Don't forget him. Mick Hucknall as well.
Mick Hucknall next to him.
Yeah.
I think that for me that really played into our favour though, because the game for me, it reminded me of the derbies when we went on the run of beating Newcastle 6 games in a row. I don't think you could argue to say that on paper, all of those games, Newcastle had a better squad than us. But in the build-up to the game, the players, the fans, they really played the occasion rather than the game itself. And for me, the 6 in a row, it's now become to be known, were because the Sunderland players stuck to task. They knew there was a game in front of them and they got through it. And I think Portsmouth, they really overplayed it. The players on social media talking before the game, how they wanted to batter us and this, that and the other. The fans the same, obviously the atmosphere in the ground. And for me, that if I was a Sunderland player in that situation, that is exactly what I'd want, because the players couldn't get settled. Sunderland got settled into the game very quickly and the atmosphere became, it was almost apathetic towards the end from Portsmouth.
Yeah, I think that's where as well. I mean, no, we keep on going back to it, but I think that's where your likes of Cattermole and Leadbitter was so important in that first 15, 20 minutes, because, they didn't let all that outside stuff affect them one bit. And I think that did transmit through to the rest of the Sunderland team. There was a couple of moments in that first 10 minutes when Portsmouth were flying and, they had the 2 bookings, a couple of pretty dreadful kind of tackles where, you felt like they were trying to get that reaction from the Sunderland players that just might have sparked something. And I think it's probably to Sunderland's credit that didn't happen, that their minds were very focused on what they had to do and they weren't detracted from that.
No, I think that's a very, very fair point, definitely. When you look at, what you've made there, Morgan, the comparison between the 6 in a row and those run of games with Portsmouth, I think that's a very good spot as far as comparisons go. When you look back at those derby games when we're winning 3-0, 2-1, 1-0, when you look back at them, what you had a Sunderland team who had a real winning mentality about them as far as derby games went. There was a real but at the same time, there wasn't like a romanticism of it. There wasn't a dramatic element. They were just coming into games knowing that they needed to beat their opposition. They were focused solely on beating the team in front of them. Whereas I think the Newcastle team came to have a culture of, we need to play so that we can finally win one. And I think those 2 different approaches to a games instill a much different mentality in the 2 sides. If you go into a game thinking, right, we just need to win, we need to do the job, we need to get it done, we need to, once again, do what we need to do, I think that's a very sort of stable, very calm mentality. But knowing that, we've got to fight back now, we've got to prove the doubters wrong, we've got to calm the fears and finally get one over on them, that's a lot different. And I think that's from that mentality, you get sort of that frustration that you could see from the Portsmouth side. It was, there was definitely a lot of that. There was definitely an element of perhaps they were being loud and boisterous around us to potentially mask the fear they had going into that game, because they knew that if they don't get going, well, they never will.
I think as well, in a funny way, it actually helped Sunderland playing the first game at home. And all the thought at the end of the season was, they've made a mess of that by losing at Southend. They dropped down. You'd rather be at home second, blah blah blah. When actually, I think because Sunderland got themselves that advantage, it piled so much pressure on Portsmouth then in their home game that you're right, they just didn't deal with it particularly well at all.
Looking back at it now, I think 5th place really plays into our hands. If you look at where we could have had. I'll ask you this, Josh, would you have rather have played Portsmouth over 2 legs or Charlton?
Well, it's easy to say Portsmouth now, we've won. But beforehand, probably Charlton, if I'm honest. But I don't think Charlton dealt very well with playing the second leg at home either. So that would have been interesting. But then a part of me is like, well, I wouldn't have wanted to play Portsmouth at Wembley because of the whole Checker Trade Trophy final and the bad memories that brings. And I'm really glad that we were the ones to knock Portsmouth out early on. Because I I don't dislike a lot of clubs, but this season I've really grown a dislike for Portsmouth. I really have.
It's become a real running thing, hasn't it?
It has.
It has felt like a narrative
pitch,
that's run right through the season.
Yeah, even on the pitch, and there was videos that they put up on their Twitter where the players were on the training ground saying, "Oh yeah, they celebrated like they'd won the World Cup and all this stuff." But it's like, why do you even care? Why are you talking about that on your own Twitter, on your own training ground? It should be, "Oh, the lads are ready," and all the other cliches that we hear every time.
Yeah.
But they just seemed so focused on us.
I think that Netflix tweet they made as well is probably the most iconic example of them setting themselves up to be the antagonists.
Yeah.
But like any antagonist in a good sort of romantic film, they've been overcome.
Is that what this has been?
Yeah.
A rom-com.
Well, I mean, romantic in the sensationalist sense, perhaps not in the literal for a genre, but yeah, why not? Hey, if the shoe fits, you know what I mean, wear it. I don't care. It'll get romantic if we win and go up. I'll say that much.
For me, again, just before we sort of tie up this point, Portsmouth, I think as a club, that's the players, the management, the fans. They shot themselves in the foot because you can't forget they beat us in a cup final at Wembley. So if anything, we should be the ones that are on the back foot. We should be the ones with the fight and talk. And it was almost, I don't know whether it's I'm being a bit cheeky, but a small club mentality where you kind of, you want to stick the knife in. But I don't know. I think had Portsmouth had been a little bit sort of quiet in the build-up, and as you said, Josh, cliche, standard football, rolled out in front of the cameras. Yeah, the lads have had a great week, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't. They just, they had something about them, and it was more than an edge. It was
arrogance, really.
Yeah, it was arrogance, and it's cost them because
it's been misplaced, hasn't it? By the end, I think they felt that they had got the Indian sign over Sunderland. I think they felt that because of the way the season had panned out and because of what happened at Wembley, that it was almost kind of destiny that they were going to do it. When actually, in many ways, they forgot about actually having to win the game on the pitch, and that's been their undoing, hasn't it? They haven't found a way to get through Sunderland in either of those games.
Not at all. The arrogance has been something else, really. And again, Morgan, you make a very good point. When you look at the two sides, we should be the ones with the chip on the shoulder. Why they're sort of bowling about with this small club syndrome is beyond me. But I mean, I again, like Josh, I've come to dislike Portsmouth this season, but I think while there perhaps is an element of small club mentality in relation to us, dare I say, touch wood, tin hat on, etc., etc. Portsmouth are a fairly decently sized club, and I think there shouldn't be an element of inferiority or of a need to prove themselves. Until that point in the season, they had done us over time and time again. They'd beat us in the league. They'd got a point away, a very hard fought point for them, and they'd obviously beaten us at Wembley before. I don't really understand why they were going on the way they were, but however they've gone, they've obviously gone about it wrong. The whole mentality is, well, it's just
it's disappointing.
Looking back, they'll feel like they've got egg on their faces, the Portsmouth fans, I think.
It's disappointing for me because I think my memories of Portsmouth when we've both been up there, Premier League, they weren't a bad set of fans. They were always decent, level-headed, and I think maybe this fall from grace has turned them. But I think coming to the stadium, I like the incident with the flare. Where I was sitting in the Premier Concourse, the final home league game of the season. That was a mouthful. There was trouble with guys sitting in the executive area.
Kind of down in front of us,
and at Wembley there was a bit of trouble, and then obviously the stuff with that idiot in the crowd. So I don't know, it's just they've not really left themselves in a good light, and I don't think there'll be many neutrals sitting looking at Portsmouth being too disappointed that they haven't got the opportunity to bounce back.
No, I don't think there will be at all. Let's talk a bit more about Portsmouth, actually. Not maybe so much their mentality now, more about how the manager Kenny Jackett set about over these two games, because when I look at them, if I look at them and think that if that was Jack Ross doing what he did, I would be extremely disappointed with our manager, because the way Jackett's gone about these two games for me has been probably the biggest reason. Well, quite obviously, it's the biggest reason why they've lost those games. The way they set out with their players over the two legs was very negative. They've had key players that he just didn't use, or at least didn't use properly. What did you make of the way he set up Scott? I know you alluded to it earlier.
I mean, the first game, for all that they were away, it still felt like they were very very kind of, cagey, very defensive, very non-committal, to the extent that they were saying, okay, we've lost 1-0, but we'll take that, that'll do us kind of thing. And, as the rest of these playoff games have proved, actually playing away from home in this pressure environment has not been that much of a disadvantage to a lot of teams who have actually gone at it. And I just feel that the way they played at the Stadium of Light almost put them on the back foot for the whole rest of the tie, because it kind of set in their minds, I think, that containment was a decent enough way to go, and they just couldn't get out of it down at Fratton Park. Like I say, at no stage did they build up their head of steam. As I said before, I was very surprised he didn't play Lowe, because I think he's the one player whose pace and trickery and kind of dribbling ability might have caused Sunderland more problems than they faced on the night. So that was a strange decision for me, for all that he hadn't played that well in the first leg. They made quite a big song and dance about getting the left full-back back and getting Pittman back. But on the night, none of them really troubled anything. And then it was very noticeable at Fratton Park, kind of being in the press box with all the home fans around us, that Hawkins is clearly not a favourite down there. They see him, I think, as being pretty one-dimensional, pretty limited. They were wanting him off before half-time. And, by the end, they were just kind of lumping balls in for him, and it was kind of meat and drink for Flanagan and Ozturk, who just dealt with it really well all night.
Yeah, especially, I think, in the case of Ozturk, who has been brought in, it would seem, to deal with the one-dimensional League One striker, and hitherto he's done it very well. Yeah. Once again, but that's another thing as well. What you say about Jamal Lowe, because Jackett didn't really use him at all in the two games, not substantially. What do you make of that, Josh? Especially in thinking about how Kenny Jackett's not used his best players. You look at Jamal Lowe and as well Ronan Curtis, who both have been, big contributors to all of Portsmouth's goals this season. And you look at the second leg and it's a home tie. They've got to win it, and they're both on the bench. If we'd left McGeady and Morgan, or McGeady and Maguire on the bench when we were 1-0 down to them for a second leg home game, would you be absolutely gutted that Ross has done that?
I'd be shocked. Specifically, I mean, Lowe, we've touched on a lot. I think Curtis did start, if I remember rightly, but I can see why you might think he didn't, because again, he was very poor.
Yeah. No, I thought he didn't start.
I think he did, and I think he started on the left, and then I can't remember the name of the lad who started instead of Lowe, but he was the quick guy who came on.
It was Solomon Otterball, wasn't
that's
it?
His name. He came on in the last 20 at the Stadium of Light. And he looked all right in the Stadium of Light, so I don't know if Kenny Jackett thought, he's got a bit of pace, because he looks rapid. So I don't know if he thought, we'll bring him on for something a bit different, so we'll start him at Fratton Park and then bring Jamal Lowe on the last 20, and I mean, what a sub to bring on. But it just didn't work out. And I think when you have something that risky and it doesn't work, you have to point the finger at the manager. Because Jamal Lowe was almost the hero of Wembley, with that kind of that chipped goal, and he was just a constant menace.
Yeah.
So it seems very bizarre, because I mean, if we all know Luke O'Nien isn't a right back. He's done a very good job, but he's not, that's not his position.
Yeah.
So you'd think, right, we're going to put Jamal Lowe, probably our best player, against Luke O'Nien. You'd think that would be a simple kind of equation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not Portsmouth manager for a reason,
well, that was it. I mean, at Wembley, Lowe spent most of his time on the right and looked good with Thompson, didn't he? They linked up really well, and Thompson was an overlap and was a threat, and you just thought that if they could get that link up going, then that was probably the way that they could make it difficult for Sunderland down at Fratton Park. And obviously he didn't start. Thompson seemed to just want to spend the whole night rolling around trying to get players booked and win free kicks and God knows what. It was very strange the way they set about it.
Absolutely. It was within the. I don't know. I just feel like the way Kenny Jackett's gone about the whole thing has been completely wrong. And if, as I said before, if that was my manager, I would be furious with him for the way he's gone about it. I don't know, a part of me as well, I'll throw this question to you, Morgan. A part of me thinks, and I could be way off the mark here, so you tell me what you think about this, but I think given how he's used players who perhaps he hasn't gone for the more creatively gifted or just like naturally talented players, he's gone for players who are fast, and he's put a lot of faith in maybe big Ollie Hawkins in the second leg especially. A part of me thinks that, has Kenny Jackett just tried to do a Coventry and beat Sunderland that way? Has he looked at that game and thought, right, the likes of Brighton and Bakari and Jordi Huula have absolutely ran riot at the Stadium of Light and, absolutely demolished them to put 5 goals past them. What do you think? Do you think that's any inspiration at all for the way he set out?
I think he's probably taken a lot away from the game at Wembley, because that first half, especially in the Checkatrade Trophy final, that was the most complete first half performance I think I've seen from Sunderland. Second half, he brings on Evans, he brings on Hawkins, and it changes the game. It changes the whole dynamic. They get in, and obviously we know the end of that story. So maybe he's looked at that. I mean, I'm the best football manager in the world with hindsight. I think we all are. So his selection in Solomon Otterbar was strange, because yes, when he came on at the Stadium of Light, he had an impact, but did he really look that good, or was he just fresh and fast against Luke O'Nien, who's tired after playing 50 games? I don't know really, because it's hard to judge, because his selection in the first game is completely different from his selection in the second game. Now, if I'm Kenny Jackett, I'm setting my team up at home at Fratton Park, where you're 1-0 down, to absolutely come flying out the blocks, put a load of pressure on Sunderland, who have named what looks like quite a negative team, who are going to be pinned back, get them under pressure early on. And why is Jamal Lowe not on the pitch? If I'm a Portsmouth fan, I know we've discussed it at length, but if I'm a Portsmouth fan, like Josh alluded to earlier on, it's McGeady-esque in terms of taking him out of the team. So
I mean, the Coventry one is an interesting one, because had that Portsmouth team that played on Thursday night been up against Baldwin and Flanagan, is it slightly different? You know, Jack Ross clearly thinks it is, because he's changed that back four off the wake of the Coventry game, and we haven't seen it since. So, you know, I do think you're exactly right that Ozturk has been brought in to deal with the type of League One striker that Sunderland haven't always dealt brilliantly with this season. And, you know, he might have his limitations in other areas, but the job he's been brought in to do in the vast majority of the games when he's been in that side, he's done it pretty well.
Yeah. I suppose that's another question that brings up, though. Do you stick with this back four for Lyle Taylor? Because he's a very different striker.
He's different, isn't he?
To Ollie Hawkins.
He's actually good.
Exactly. Yeah, he's good. Yeah. He's technically good. He's strong. He's quick.
That is a good question, because I think if you're Charlton, if you're Lyle Taylor, you're looking at the Sunderland back four as it stands at the minute and thinking, I can get in and around here. I can cause problems.
Definitely.
Now, you know, to take Ozturk out and bring Baldwin back in would be a very big call at this minute, I think. You know, I can understand the rationale of why you're suggesting it, because the attributes of those players probably set up better for Taylor. Yeah. But, you know, Baldwin's kind of been out for so long now, and Ozturk has become such a big pivotal part of it that I think it would be a really big call. I can't see it, but I can kind of see why you floated.
I think out of the two, Ozturk would be the one I would keep in. I think it would be more Flanagan I would look at taking out. Maybe for a Dunn.
Of course, Dunn's the other one. Yeah.
My fear there, though, with Ozturk and Dunn is that you've got two big lads who can hoof the ball and, in the way of technical skill, do very little else.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that's the pairing that if I was Lyle Taylor, I would be the most excited about visiting. Like, oh yes, two big dafties, great. I'm just gonna get in there and just sort of like
it's tough one.
Wriggle my way around, and I'll get through at some point. I don't know.
I think Jack Ross would be the bravest manager in the world to change his back four now.
That's what I think.
It's not an implausible thing to consider, though. He's absolutely, you know, dropped some, you know, big calls before. I mean, when he took out both of his defenders for the Doncaster game, that was absolutely huge. You know, I was absolutely terrified when I saw that. I thought, what? You know, I was like, at that point, you have to think, okay, he's either very good at what he's doing or his head's gone. It was one of those cases where you didn't know what was happening. But evidently, his head's in the right place.
The difference in those situations have been, though, his hand's been forced by obviously the Doncaster game off the back of the Coventry game, was it?
It was.
Yes.
I mean, we don't need to talk about that. I think looking at coming off the back of 2 clean sheets, I can understand how we can analyse it and say Ozturk maybe won't be suited, or Dunn or Flanagan. But I think you look at it, it's 2 clean sheets, as I've said. Flanagan, for me, has improved massively as a defender since Ozturk's come in. Because Ozturk's just simplified everything. Yeah. And I was a big critic of Ozturk early on in the season. I don't think he had many very good performances, but he's come back in, he's been great. Flanagan, my only sort of gripe with him now is he panics a little bit in possession, but I can live with that. I can live with that if he does his defensive duties right.
If he panics in possession and his go-to is to hoof the ball out, then that that alleviates some fears for me.
Yeah, I'm
Where
all right
we've
with that.
seen Baldwin and Flanagan earlier on in the
it's
season.
when they try and play it
Exactly,
out and
yeah.
they don't have the
And they
ability
just
to play it
can't,
out.
yeah.
No, it comes back to a point that we've made time and time again on the podcast, but that if we had defenders who were good in the air, good at doing the basics, and were good ball players, they probably wouldn't be in League One.
That's
ultimately what it is.
exactly the answer. You know, I mean, the brutal reality is that for the vast majority of players, you know, there is a reason why they're in League One, and it does stand out with defenders more because, you know, if they're that good on the ball, but they can also do the defensive duties, then you know, they're in demand right the way up the pyramid.
Matt Clark won't be at Portsmouth next season.
No,
I don't think so.
No way.
No.
Speaking of defenders, though, who shouldn't be in League One, in my opinion, I really rated Brian Oviedo's performance against Portsmouth. I thought he was absolutely excellent.
I mean, over the last month, to be fair, you know, he obviously had everything that happened in January. You wondered, you know, would he come back in? Obviously, James's injuries kind of, again, to a degree, forced the situation. But to Oviedo's credit, since he's come back in, he's looked solid defensively. But then, you know, he is one that actually is pretty decent with the ball at his feet. And, you know, when he gets forward, you are thinking, okay, you know, he can kind of knit a pass here or put a cross in. He's got that, hasn't he? But he's defended a lot better this last month, I think.
Oh, definitely. He's what we possibly had earlier this season with Oviedo was some very good attacking movements, some very great deliveries, but then perhaps defending that was a bit lackluster when teams broke. We saw a lot of early. You know, when there was that period like early on in the season where we were conceding loads of early goals, we'd still win, but we'd concede like one early on, and it would just be quite an uncomfortable thing to happen. That happened a lot with our general defending, and I think Oviedo was, you know, certainly a symptom.
I think you're right. I mean, this is in a way going to be a kind of controversial one, but I think defensively he probably benefits from not having McGeady in the team. McGeady gives you so much going forward that you would always have him on your team sheet.
I agree.
But I suspect if you're Oviedo, you're actually thinking a Lewis Morgan or a Honeyman or even a Power if he ends up there, or even Maguire will protect you a lot more than McGeady does. So, I think that while Sunderland have undoubtedly lost something going forward from not having McGeady in the team, maybe defensively it just means that you've got two players covering on either side rather than, you know, that's not McGeady's game, is it?
Yeah, I think that it was the Doncaster game. I noticed Oviedo was communicating really well with Power. Because of that reason, Power was having to do a lot of work on the left, defensively out of possession, because, like you say, McGeady, for how good he is going forward, your full-back work rate's doubled because he just doesn't. To be fair to McGeady, though, I think, especially the last few months, he's improved that aspect of his game.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, he's not one that you see him and think, you know, he's wandering around, he's just not interested in it. It's just not his game. It's not, you know, he does it differently, if you know what I mean. So I think that is an element of it, that it's to help tighten things up a bit. But as you would say as well, I think Oviedo has knuckled down pretty well when, you know, we all kind of knows what happened in January.
Oh yeah, with Oviedo and McGeady, I think what you have with Jack Ross, with that selection you have, right, if I play Oviedo and McGeady, I'm essentially playing a lad who's now wing back with a lad who's now winger, which leaves little leeway for actual defending down that side.
Yeah.
So I think what you say there is absolutely true. I don't think it's a controversial point at all. If anything, it's a very logical one. If you say you play someone like Reece James with Aidan McGeady, what you have is a full-back.
Yeah, it's
very
different.
much a full-back with a winger, where that obviously McGeady's lack of defending, even though he's doing a lot better, it's not what he naturally is meant to do in that role. Morgan's full-backness compensates for that.
Yeah.
Not the best word I could have used there. I've got better words in the lexicon than full-backness, but we're using it, we're going with it. When you've got Oviedo and when you've got someone else, as you say, then it works both ways with someone like Max Power or Honeyman or even Maguire, someone who was a lot more sort of disposed to actually defending.
Yeah.
Because I suppose it would be right to say that McGeady's more of what you'd call an inside forward in the sense that he contributes little.
Yes.
A winger is what you would contribute more so to defending because they would get back when the team's on the break. But McGeady's principal focus is to try and beat his man and cut in.
Correct.
Then if the ball's lost, he's in the mixer. He's nowhere near where he should be for defending. And then Oviedo, he'll be in those positions as well. So then if you've got two tracking back, you've got a wide open space down that flank. That's just how I see it. And I think it's it's definitely something where I think you've got two very good players, but their attributes aren't similar. And it's one of those cases where, yes, you can have good players, but you still need to have a good tactician as the manager, to deploy them correctly.
Do you think it's that important as to why we've kept 2 clean sheets against Portsmouth?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I think we've just everything we've done. I think we've done right in that sense. I think when in the first game it was a very cagey affair in the first half. I think neither team really wanted to break down the other for fear of maybe giving away the first advantage. But then when we started coming at them, we got that head of steam, the likes of which Portsmouth didn't get, as Morgan pointed out. And then we just went at them, and then we got the goal. We could have had another really. Honeyman's effort was very unlucky. And then when we went to Portsmouth, I think, and we've not really said this yet, and I really want to, but I think in fact, tell me what you make of this. I think we did down there what Portsmouth tried to do here but failed to do, and that's just to be resolute and to see it out. I don't know what you guys make of that. I don't know if you think those philosophies are similar at all.
I agree. Yeah, I agree to a point. I think you're right. I mean, obviously, the fundamental difference was that Sunderland were defending something, and so it was logical for them to do that. I was surprised even at the Stadium of Light that Portsmouth kind of went down that route in the first leg, because I thought there was, there's nothing really between the two sides. There was an opportunity for them to win that game and have something to take down. I thought it was strange that they were almost going into it saying, we'll take the 1-goal defeat. It seemed unnecessarily kind of negative. So yeah, I think there are similarities, but I just think that, Sunderland were right to do it in the second leg because they had the lead to defend. I couldn't really understand why Portsmouth tried to do that in the first leg.
No, I think in no context should a team ever try and defend a 1-0 loss. Yeah. And you see in the Premier League with teams who face Man City, they think, oh, right, we're only 2-0 down. Let's just try and make it respectable, boys. It's a similar thing there. I mean, the mentality seemed to be, right, okay, we've only got a 1-goal disadvantage, so we'll just keep it at that and we'll be all right. But for me...
Well, if it had been flipped, I can't imagine that Jack Ross would have taken Sunderland down to Fratton Park and said, if we're coming away with a 1-0 defeat, we'll take that and we'll go up. And, at the very, very least, I'm pretty sure he would have gone out to try and get a goal and see out what that then made Portsmouth do. And you didn't feel like Portsmouth were doing that at all in that first game.
You go. Morgan.
Sorry, yeah. I just think the mentality between the two sides, the way obviously Portsmouth and Sunderland finished the season, they both finished the season quite poorly. I think it's a really positive reflection on our squad that we were able to bounce back and put in 2 pretty good performances and come away with a playoff final. Portsmouth they looked flat, really, throughout the full 180 minutes. And they don't really look like they've been able to bounce back from a position where when we came away from the Stadium Light, the 1-1 draw, I think everyone was saying, well, yeah, Portsmouth are going to go up now in second. And I think that's really been a bit of a momentum crusher for them. Yeah. And like I said, Leadbitter and Cattermole on Thursday night led from the front, so to speak. But more so, not just on a footballing perspective, from a mental point of view as well. And it's for me, that was the biggest difference.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that now. That's a very good time, I think. I think, as we all know, Leadbitter went into the Portsmouth game with his mother having very recently passed away. Yeah. And we'll go straight back to you, Morgan, with this one. Just how big of a testament is that to his resilience and his character?
You can't really put it into words. I mean, everybody deals with grief differently, but to go into a game of football that means so much, not just to the fans, but to him, also a Sunderland lad, a Sunderland supporter, to try and get into his mindset and where he would have been. I guess Leadbitter probably feels a little bit of responsibility to the club and to the city because he's come back and he's obviously wanted to get the club promoted. We haven't done it automatically. So to be able to still have that in the front of his mind when something so horrific and tragic's happened, you can't put it into words what a strong character he is.
Yeah. I think if you had to say what's the right character to have in the dressing room, the answer would be Grant Leadbitter. If given how sort of mercurial, how many mercenaries we've had in recent times, it's a cliche, it's a very happy clappery thing to say, but it's just great to have lads who care and want to put on the shirts, because at no point in the season has it ever felt more of a profound statement than it had, watching Cattermole going to console him after the game, and him just sort of staring off, looking at Fratton Park after having just played a massive role in securing his side's place at Wembley. It's it's absolutely massive. And I think while you should always choose quality over merit when you're picking a team, I think in most situations, Leadbitter would be my name on the team sheet for Wembley.
Yeah.
He needs to be there.
And I love the relationship that Catamall and Leadbitter seem to have now.
Yeah, well, given the fact that about 10 years ago in that derby, they each other.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah,
and I think that's.
I mean, it was really, really strange after the game because obviously, we cover Borough as well, so I've kind of covered Grant for 10 years, so I know him reasonably well, and he was there on the pitch obviously after the kind of 10 minutes after the game, and part of me was thinking, should I pop across and say hello? And then you could see just how. And at this stage, I didn't know any of the backstory, so you could see how emotional. He was literally shaking. And Katz obviously goes over, and then a couple of members of the backroom staff go over. And I've got to admit, my thought at the time was that it was probably related to his dad, and that was it an anniversary or was it his birthday or something like that? And so right, leave him, and it's obviously it's a very emotional moment for him. And then we learned the following morning of what it was, and you just think, my goodness me, how on earth can you kind of get your head around and not only play, but play and put in a performance like he put in. But then in other ways, it doesn't massively surprise me because as you've alluded to there, that's just who he is. He is the ultimate, and again we're going to go down cliche street here, but he's the ultimate old-fashioned footballer with old-fashioned football and values. He always was at Middlesbrough. He'd be the one that would be calling players out if he didn't think that they were putting it in. He'd be the one dragging them up by the boots when they 2-0 down at half time and whatever. That's just his personality. And he has to be a massive force in that dressing room because he was for 10 years at Middlesbrough. Even when he wasn't playing in the last year at Middlesbrough, he was still the one that whenever you spoke to the rest of the team about what was happening on the training ground, he'd be the one that, even if it meant that somebody was keeping him out of the team, he'd still be the one chivying them along, cajoling them, demanding from them. And that's just got to be a massive positive force in the dressing room.
Yeah, and the Middlesbrough fans were gutted when he left as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, gutted, and yet in a strange way, I think most of them said, well, do you know what? Good luck to you, which is even rarer in football.
Yeah.
When not only does he leaves to the club just up the road, but their view was, well, we hope it's a success for you. Go and play and go and
get them up.
Go and get them up. Yeah.
I think the club could do a lot worse than ensuring that he's around even after his playing days are over. I mean, the only sort of stalwart we've got left is Kevin Ball.
Yeah.
And I think Leadbitter is someone who can naturally come in and take that mantle.
No, I think that's a really good point. And funnily enough, I think Catamall has evolved into that as well. Spoke to him a week or so ago at the training ground and came away from that thinking, do you know what? He'll be a manager one day. And you would never have thought that 10 years ago. You probably never thought that 5 years ago. He was still the daft kid who did this and couldn't keep his head and blah, blah, blah. But he's matured so much. And he's another one that I think the club need to look seriously at longer term. How can they use him? Because, he's evolved massively over the last 4 or 5 years in that aspect.
Well, I mean, with Catamall, you can see it absolutely. But by no means here am I comparing the two people because I would never want to do that to Catamall. But Joey Barton's become a manager. I think that does just show you that.
Lee Bowyer.
Yeah. The daft lads
of next weekend. Yeah.
The daft lads of yesteryear can become the sort of mature adults of today.
Yeah.
With, of course, the exception of Joey Barton.
You're absolutely right. Clearly people change and people surprise you, and but I think with both of them, there's real character there in both of them now.
Definitely, yeah. So let's look ahead now because I'm going to use the Lee Bowyer mention there to segue us into a discussion about Wembley now because it's important now we look ahead to that game and we look to who will be the players who are going to turn up and turn out for us at Wembley, so to speak. literally and figuratively. We need the right. Jack Ross has got to get it right. That much is blatantly obvious. We need the right team with the right characters and the right philosophy to see off a Charlton side who we haven't lost to this season, but we've really been tested against. Obviously, there was the first game of the season, which came away a nice poetic 2-1 win to start with, but a game we had to work hard for to get the win nonetheless. And then, of course, we went to their place and we got a 1-1 in a game where we could have easily lost because they were very, very good in the second half, if I remember. So what I did is yesterday we asked this week's quick question. It's not a feature we've used for a couple of weeks, but I felt this was quite an opportune time to bring it back. I asked the people of Twitter who will be our most crucial or game-changing player at Wembley. So what we'll do is we'll read out some of them and then we'll just discuss them. We'll see what we think about them. So we'll start with Richard with the Year 6 teacher. Personally, I think it will be Catamol. He sets the tone, he sets the press. Charlton are going to look to get Taylor in behind, so he needs to marshal that back four and not allow us to get sucked into being too deep. So what do you think, Josh? What do you make of that? We've discussed Taylor already.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly going to be huge. He, for me, is almost the captain on the pitch. And I know, obviously, George has the armband, but, you know, Catamol's the one who rallies everyone and makes sure everyone is where they need to be and doing what they need to be doing, him and Leadbitter when they're both on the pitch at the same time. So yeah, it'll be huge, and I would love nothing more than to see Catamol be on a winning Sunderland side at Wembley.
Mm-hmm. Would you go that far then? Let's go to Morgan now. Do you think Catamol should be your captain then if you want someone to really marshal the team and set the tone and set the press, as Richard says? Or would you perhaps give that to Honeyman?
Well, I would keep Honeyman captain. I think it would be very harsh to rip the armband off him on the final game of the season. But well, I think he will, regardless of what my opinion is, which is I like Honeyman. But yeah, I think Honeyman will start. Catamol, whether he's got the armband or not, he's a leader, so you don't lose that by not giving him the armband. I think in terms of, obviously, Josh has spoken really well there on what he offers to us, what he offers against the opposition. Aribo for Charlton is a threat. And I think he could be the man who contains him. He's done it in the cup final against Man City. He marshalled the team really, really well, and we defended against one of the best teams in the world for 60-odd minutes, I think it was, before we conceded. So a performance like that, he's got it in him. So yeah, he's massively important.
And Charlton don't have the world-class goals that Man City do in the lot.
No.
Well, don't say that now. Don't say that yet.
I mean,
if there's ever a bigger jinx, it was that.
Got that out.
When you were saying there, the name that leapt into my head was Catamol. You know, I think he will be very important in terms of just dictating how Sunderland play. If it's a kind of structured football match, I think Sunderland win it. I think the risk for Sunderland is that it becomes a kind of helter-skelter, tear up, which games have turned into sometimes this season. You know, one end to the other, all sorts going on. That's the risk for me. And I think Catamol is the player who stops that when he's on his game.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Black Cat Yank says, that's a good question. McGeady, if fit, would give a moment of brilliance, and whoever has the task of keeping Taylor under wraps. So that again could be Catamol. I would say is essentially an indirect mention of Lee Catamol. And also he says maybe Oviedo. So what do we think? I mean, obviously, if we're talking about world-class goals in the locker, you know, I'm not saying McGeady's a world-class winger. I've not quite, my levels of delusion haven't quite reached that level. But as far as relative to League One, he's got some, you know, he's got a blinder hidden away somewhere.
Well, I think it's the two key questions are probably, does he play Leadbitter and Catamol, and does McGeady start? I think they're the two real kind of, you know, imponderables. McGeady's an interesting one because it's how much leeway do you give him, isn't it? In terms of, by the middle of this week, you would imagine Jack Ross is going to want his team nailed down so he can sort out, you know, various tactical little tweaks, various things on the training ground. So, you know, is Aidan McGeady such an important player that you give him until literally Saturday afternoon to prove his fitness? I don't think you do that for a final like this. I think if Aidan McGeady's going to play, you need by Wednesday to be pretty certain that he's going to play, and then your team's set up and you do it. I don't think that Sunderland can afford to kind of tailor their entire preparations over a last-minute decision on Aidan McGeady. For all that, I completely, you know, he's been Sunderland's best player all season. He's their most likely game winner. I accept all of that. But I just think that this side can win this game without Aidan McGeady.
Yeah.
And if they have to do it without him, fine, do it without him.
I think the likelihood is that if he was going to come back, he would come off the bench. Given his fitness, he's a very good option from the bench.
Yeah.
But as you say there, for the reasons aforementioned, you can't tailor an entire game around a man who may or may not be fit. If he's fit, then obviously he's straight on there.
Correct.
Jack knows what he wants to do with him. But again, his fitness could also dictate the role he plays. If you want to play a very free, expressive role, just like in and around the sort of the last third, in the whole maybe winger turned number 10 in sort of free way he can do as an inside forward, then that would mean that he's not playing with that gammy foot he's got. I don't know. I mean, I just think there's a lot there.
I think you're right. I think he will be. I think if he's in the squad, I think you're right. I think he'll be on the bench. I'd be really surprised if, the fact that he's pulled out on the 10 minutes before the game in the first leg, he's not even travelled for the second leg. No. I'd be amazed if he started on Sunday.
I think
what an option from the bench.
Correct, yeah.
And I think the point you've made is about the way the game goes is the most important in terms of if it's a structured game. I agree. I think Sunderland win. I don't think you can go into a week before a cup final where you're not sure on your team and you can't prepare for that type of game. Well, the last thing we want is an open game like Coventry, because that will descend into chaos and we'll lose the game. Charlton, like you touched on earlier on, they've got some very good attacking players. Lyle Taylor, Aribo is another. So you need to go into the game. You need to know 100% what you're going to do. I think for me, I know we're talking about McGeady, and I know he's on the other side, but Gooch is somebody who I think would be possibly sort of under the radar important player just for the work rate you get from him to try and counteract Charlton. So completely agree. McGeady, if he's 90% fit, get him in the squad, get him on the bench. But I think it's going to be too much of a big ask to get him in from the start.
Yeah. Well, that's it's funny you mentioned Gooch, because the next reply I had here was from Phil Smith, who says, I think Lyndon Gooch due to his directness and Luke O'Nien for his energy and class. What do we mean by directness, do we think, then, Morgan? For
From Gooch?
Yeah.
Well, he's direct, I guess. Yeah. He's
cutting edge insight from the ROKER Report.
Well, he's not the type of player who's going to pick up the ball, beat three men, and swing across in. No. He's the type of player that if you give him the ball in space, he's got a hellish final ball. We've seen that in the first leg.
Put a couple of balls over.
Yeah,
he stuck it right on Charlie White's head, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing with him as well, the work rate you get from him. So yeah, he's a winger, but he's almost like a kind of winger fullback hybrid, but not a wing back, if that makes sense. Because he gives you everything.
Best games were at wing back.
Oh, the football manager term is defensive winger.
Therefore he is a defensive winger.
Yeah,
but he's the work rate you get from him in defence, but also the output you get going forward. This isn't to say he's a world class player, because he's not. But he's someone who I think in a game like Sunday might become can be the difference.
I suspect. Yeah, I can see all of that. I think I'm not sure where you get him into your starting side.
No.
Because if you play Leadbitter and Cattermole, then you've got Maguire, Honeyman, Power, Morgan. You would imagine it'd be three from that four in front of those
for your starting 11.
For your starting 11, yeah. Even if say Grant comes out and Power drops back, I still think they're probably your next three. With McGeady as your wild card. So, I mean, I can see the argument for Gooch's kind of the defensive side of his game could be useful, but I'd be surprised if he started ahead of any of them players.
And I don't want to be too negative on him, but when you look as well, if you've got McGeady as you say, your wild card on the bench, how much more room is there on the bench for another player like Gooch? If you think about it, right, you'd have Reuter would take up space on the bench. So with McGeady, we're now down to 5.
You'd have a centre half, wouldn't you? Say if he's not playing.
Yep. So then we've got 4 left. Grigg, there's 3. So we've got 3 more spots.
You've still got one of your Morgan or who misses out.
Yeah.
2.
I think Leadbitter probably comes out of the starting lineup as well.
Yeah.
Another. Okay, so there's 1. So then
he might be your last sub, mightn't he?
It might be a last sub, or he might prefer to have a full back there. He might want to have, just in case we need defensive cover. Adam Matthews could be on there. I mean, I don't know where Adam Matthews is these days.
I mean, the other thing is, because it's a one-off game, because you've got to win it. Is there an argument that you go Sterling as well as a kind of wild card in case you're chasing the game at some stage?
That could be a
That's a possibility.
It's a risk.
Mind you, that's
be a risk.
big cult hero status if he gets
Yeah, can you imagine that?
Absolutely massive. Are you kidding? He'd be like, it would be bizarre because he just, for me, and again, I don't want to be too negative on any of our players, but he has all the hallmarks of a no-mark loan that you get in January. Makes about 5 appearances.
Yeah,
scores
loan.
once.
Yeah.
He's got all the hallmarks of a Benjani or a Louis Saha for Sunderland, where you bring him in for half a season and you just you can really easily forget.
He's that kind of pub question in 10 years' time. Who was that player, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I guarantee you he will be in 10 years' time, and my 32-year-old self will not get it right. That's how it'll go.
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm looking at the screen here as well. I'm surprised to see not many people have mentioned Maguire.
No, maybe we can scroll, Josh. I almost called you Johnny again. Maybe we can scroll, maybe we'll see.
Because for me, I think there's one. Spelled it wrong. God, annoying. For me, he could be our key player. I think Maguire is the type of player who is going to relish Wembley. Mm-hmm. He is a big game player, 100%. He's the one who stands up. He always wants the ball. I think he's class, and I think he loves these games.
Yeah. Well, as Josh has mentioned there, Ross Lowry says, McGeady or Maguire, as they are our playmakers, but it will take a team performance. Everyone needs to be on their game.
Also true.
Yeah. But it's a funny one. We're kind of mentioning every player in the team here, but to a certain degree, Wyke as well. You know, the way that Sunderland play now, Wyke's going to have a good game. He's going to have to hold the ball up. He's going to have to get other players in and around him. You'd like to think he had a goal in him as well, but, you know, he's another one who this last month has quietly put in some pretty decent displays. You know, I thought he played well in both Portsmouth games.
He was a nuisance.
I thought he played well in the first game. Yeah. And, you know, he's going to start ahead of Grigg, isn't he? So,
looks that way.
You know, he won't necessarily win it in terms of getting the winning goal, but I suspect the way he plays will be very important to how Sunderland do.
Oh, yeah. Wyke has just been, while he hasn't been sort of, you know, a massive goal scorer, he's been a nuisance, and he's done a really good job of holding the ball up and bringing his teammates into play. And I think even though maybe if we look back in 5 years' time on his Wikipedia, you might think, he was a bit naff, he wasn't very good. But you can't underestimate the contributions he's made, which haven't necessarily involved scoring goals. I mean, you know, when you've got Will Grigg there with McGeady and the Gammy Foot Club, because none of them can play because they're injured, you know, Wyke's really stepped up, and I think a lot of people were starting to turn on him and starting to think, we've signed another Josie, we've signed the League One Josie from Bradford. But no, he's had some really good games.
Yeah, I think so. He kind of fits into that category of where we were talking about before. If strikers could score 20 goals and win everything in the air and do this and do that and the other, then with the greatest one in the world, there wouldn't be League One strike. There's a reason why Charlie Wyke has spent his career applying his trade where he's done it. You know, because he does have limitations, but, you know, in the League One environment, I think he's shown what he's good at in this last month.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's that classic point of, well, if he was better, he wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like quite a sort of backhanded thing to say, but it's true. It's entirely factual. That's how it is. Another one of our replies, so I want to mention, because there was a really good thread that came up on Twitter from this. Falk, one of our writers, said Maguire as well as one of them. I love them. Yeah, when Johnny, again, you're called Josh, not Johnny. Speaking of getting names wrong, when Josh said just there that that guy spelt Maguire wrong. Our man from the extra pod's done the exact same thing. Yeah,
too much time in Scotland, I think.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So to reply, Jack Ford says Griggs.
Griggs,
yeah. Johnny said Charlie Wyke with an I. Shamar replied saying Jonas McLaughlin. We've got Jay Collins saying Alistair Ozturk. Johnny Goldsmith says Luke 08.
I like that. Yeah, I like that one.
Jake Collinson says Brian Oviedo, again Brian with an I.
Yeah.
I said James Rees. Jake says Matthew Adams. Graham says Robin Reuter. Jake says George Honeyperson. Colorado Hume. And then I've got Donald Haight right on the end.
Very good, very good.
So there we are. So,
I don't think it's going to get better than that. Should we just stop recording?
So thank you for joining us on the Big Crack Report. None of us are funny. Good night. No, but a few more things. I think that's probably, to be fair, like on that little stream of terrible jokes, I think that's a good way to end that just there. So I think we're going to turn our attention to you now, Scott, because we've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
I don't believe, have you come on the podcast before?
I haven't.
You haven't?
No,
that's
podcast
right.
debut.
Yeah, well, I mean, that shows my inexperience as host. And I don't know exactly who's been on all of them. If I had Connor here, he'd have a whole spreadsheet.
Connor would know. Yeah, Connor would know.
Oh, yeah, Scott, he's been on.
Without a shadow, without a doubt.
Yeah, well, according to my algorithms here, we could have had him on in February 2017, but he didn't come on. No, yeah, so tell us a bit about yourself then, Scott, as you've not been on before and as you are a new voice for the
Yes.
Report listeners.
So I'm a Walsingham lad.
Yes.
Love Walsingham. Bit of Weardale, bit of County Durham.
That's Weardale.
So that was brought up in Walsingham. Mum and Dad still live there, etc., etc. But my first journalism job, I worked for the Press Association, the agency bit when I first qualified. But then I worked at the Yorkshire Evening Post in Leeds for about 3 years in the Venables Peter Reid implosion era.
Oh yes.
Which was it was great actually. I mean, a great city to live in, Leeds, but it was interesting times at that football club when it was just, you know, kind of really hurtling into meltdown that they've never quite got out of. But then I moved to the Echo in 2004, and so I've had about a decade and a half covering Sunderland, Newcastle Borough, which has been certainly interesting. Some highs, some lows, and pretty much everything in between.
Yeah, there's some real lows in there.
There certainly has been.
Crikey, if you could pick them more depressing three clubs, it'd be the North East trio there.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. But no, it's great. I mean, you know, you feel like you're covering clubs that actually matter to the people who... And I know all football clubs matter to fans, of course they do, but I still think there is something about the place that all three of those clubs have in the communities around here that does make it different.
Of course, Scott. Just ask the 17 Portsmouth fans. They'll tell you just how crucial their club is.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
It's okay. At this point, there wouldn't be any Portsmouth fans who listen to the Roker Report 1 hour and 1 minute in.
I'd be surprised.
I'm sure
I'd be surprised.
I'm sure if I'm looking for bites, I won't do it that way. Should have just start with that early doors, but no, sorry.
Yeah, so you know, it's good. Although I would like to see if teams actually win something for once. So the thought of actually seeing a team win at Wembley would be great. Yeah. I've seen Darlington win at Wembley. I've seen West Auckland win at Wembley.
Oh yes.
And I think I've seen Shields win at Wembley. And that's it. So it would be nice to see one of the others win.
Was that the FA Vase?
It certainly was.
Yes,
it certainly was.
What a trophy.
Yeah.
Here's a question, right? If it's a vase, is it even a trophy?
Yeah, exactly. It's on at the minute, I think, actually. Isn't it?
Lane Orient.
Yeah, that's the trophy. Yeah.
Sorry, boys, I'm off.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're missing that.
But that's been the you know, the Wembley high points from a North East perspective. So it'd be nice to see a team win a game that actually matters a bit more than that.
Yeah, definitely. Out of interest, and what was the first ever big game you covered for the Echo?
So the first game that I covered was Sunderland at Birmingham, an FA Cup replay, extra time, and I'm pretty sure it was Tommy Smith scored twice in extra time and Sunderland won 2-0. And it was like, from a journalistic point of view, extra time is horrendous because you're past your deadline. Extra time at St Andrews, which is like fallen to bits, a decrepit, tiny little press box, is worse than anything. And the fact it was the first game was like, bloody hell, it's got to get easier from here. So that was the Wednesday night. And then on the Sunday, I went to Cardiff and did Middlesbrough winning the Carling Cup final. So when I say I've never seen that then is the only time I've seen a North East team win anything resembling a major trophy. So, so, you know, pretty much downhill in the 15 years since then.
Yeah, your first ever prestigious win that you've covered for a North East club was Steve McLaren's Middlesbrough.
Steve McLaren, yeah, it was. Steve McLaren cavorting around with Steve Gibson in Cardiff.
Steve McLaren.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, there have obviously been. I mean, you know, there's plenty of games that stand out, but I guess from a Sunderland point of view, the Luton away, obviously winning the league down there was pretty amazing. The standout moment from that was just interviewing Roy Keane in a kind of broom closet at Kenilworth Road, which is another ground that, you know, is like you would imagine it to be from a work perspective. And he'd kind of been on the pitch and everything, and then time was dragging on when we needed some kind of quotes, and you crammed into this kind of broom closet with Roy Keane and saying, well, they're not, you know, that was when it, they're not having a bus. There's no bus. We're not doing anything like that. So you kind of want, right, just say something, just say anything that says this is like a big day, it's really good, it's great for the club. They're not having a bus. Forget it. I'm not, it means nothing.
That's great.
So that was obviously stands out. Old Trafford, is the obvious one. The semi-final was great, was brilliant, and then the whole final experience was great. But
Sorry,
yeah,
I've got a really funny image of trying to get like being in a broom cupboard with an increasingly irritated Roy Keane trying to get a soundbite. That's like Cluedo. Yeah. That's like Roy Keane with the broom at Kenilworth Road, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. And I mean, the Keane, even now, the Keane era kind of stands out because it, from a work point of view, it was great because he was, he a really interesting bloke, and like you would imagine, you had to know where you were with him because he would quite easily challenge you. If he didn't think your question was right, he'd let you know. But then I think he quite liked when you stood your ground. And I think he thought that if you just caved in at the first sign of him baring his teeth, that it was I think he was a bit disappointed by that. I think he actually liked the kind of sport of it more than you'd think.
Did you ever have any sort of like interesting dialogue with Roy Keane, or did you ever overhear any with a journalist?
The funniest things used to be some of the away grounds you'd go to. So in that championship season, Rotherham, I remember, and you'd get what I used to absolutely hate was their kind of press or their people in their press room wanting his autograph. And he would go absolutely berserk about that. It was like, are you a journalist? Why are you asking me for your autograph then? And and quite often it would be like, some kind of nice 65-year-old bloke who's covered Rotherham all his life, and like this is the pinnacle. This is his big chance to meet Roy Keane, and he just would absolutely butcher him, and you could see it coming because it happened at so many away games that season, and it would just be don't go asking me for my autograph. You're a journalist. Ask me a question.
Can I just interject with a quick question? Yeah. Did he ever mellow out towards the end of his term, or was he consistent all the way through?
No, not really. He was pretty consistent all the way through.
Roy till the very end.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't say that he did really. I mean, he was never. So we had Gordon Strachan at Borough, who you could say was, broadly similar in a kind of spiky way. You got Gordon Strachan was just at times obnoxious. Yeah, he was not. He did not come across as a kind of nice human being in any way, shape, or form. Keane wasn't like that. Keane was personable when he wanted to be. You never felt that he was being arsey just for the sake of it. In the way that you sometimes did with Strachan, but he definitely had an edge to him, yeah, and he would quite happily call you out if he thought that your question wasn't right or you were going down a route he didn't want you to go down. But then he also, the other good thing about Keane from a work point of view is he just came out with brilliant stuff. You could ask him anything, you could ask him anything, and certainly from the national lads' point of view, trying to get Sunderland as a championship club into national papers, it was kind of manna from heaven when he'd just go on a rant about Man United or football in general, or because they'd ring their desk, or Roy Keane's just said this, right, okay, yeah, forget the fact that you're a championship club, it's Roy Keane being controversial. So
it must be just a gold mine of like sort of journalistic content, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I know, absolutely, and it was an interesting period, definitely, and the fact that Sunderland were winning on the pitch, getting promoted. The whole thing just made it an interesting time to be covering the club, certainly.
I bet. Which manager would you say, perhaps taking Roy Keane out of the equation here, did you have the best or at least the most interesting sort of working relationship with?
Probably McCarthy at the start. Probably Mick McCarthy. Yeah, Mick, who was, again, had his moments, could be blunt, could be, could have a go at you if he wanted to, but just came across as a pretty decent bloke and knew the game inside out, knew what you wanted. wanted to know, knew who you were, wanted to have a chat with you, wanted to have a relationship. So yeah, I would say probably McCarthy. I mean, you know, for all that it went wrong, Steve Bruce was pretty decent from a journalistic point of view. Again, you know, he's a pretty decent bloke, I think, and was happy to have a relationship. And then you had, you know, someone like, at the other side of it, I mean, you know, someone like Advocat was very difficult to cover because didn't really want that kind of relationship at all, had no interest in knowing who you were, didn't really want to get into a conversation about anything. And so, you know, from a work point of view, that he was quite difficult.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine there's a big difference there between maybe the mentality of players, of managers like McCarthy and Bruce compared to Advocat. I mean, it's sort of common knowledge among Sunderland fans that he sort of reluctantly took the job back.
That was it. Yeah, and you never felt that he was really there for the duration, and you never felt that he really bought into the whole, you know, ethos of it and being right in amongst it. In the way that, to be fair, most Sunderland managers are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I suppose it's a fairly by-the-by point, but Advocat he looked like a tired old man who wanted to retire and didn't want to be just sort of here at Sunderland in the cauldron, so to speak. I think there was definitely an element of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I'd imagine so.
You know, and to a degree, Moyes was like that as well. You know, very morose, very hard work. You felt like you weren't really getting anywhere with it a lot of the time. So
there's nothing likable about Moyes, is that at all? Doesn't matter how many people I ask. Doesn't matter how deep you dig. You cannot find a single likable thing about David Moyes.
Yeah. I would kind of agree with that. And he just wouldn't say anything particularly interesting. You know what I mean? So you felt like you were kind of pulling teeth a lot with it, really. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he was quite difficult. Allardyce was all right. Grayson was fairly dull. You knew when you were going to his press conferences you weren't going to get any kind of dynamite little nuggets.
Wasn't really a dynamite kind of guy, Simon Grayson.
I'm trying to think. I've probably missed about 25 managers, haven't I? Let's be honest, in there in the last 10 years.
Were you in the room when Grayson referred to the Sunderland job as a Titanic or a big juggernaut?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, turning around the Titanic. Well, good luck with that one.
It's like turning around the Titanic or a big juggernaut. Why? I mean, I know that perhaps things can be said in the moment that can be taken out of context and be wrong, but why would you ever refer to your new job as the Titanic?
The Titanic, yeah, I know.
What you're saying is there is I am going to fail, basically.
It's alarm bells ringing at an early stage there, isn't it? Di Canio, of course, is one we've missed, isn't it? Which was interesting.
Yeah. Was it really?
Yeah. I mean, he was the opposite, where you kind of knew you were going to get something, you just didn't have a blooming clue what he would end up being. He could say absolutely anything, but he was an interesting fella.
Yeah. When did he break the news about him not distributing ketchup at the stadium? Was that quite like a sudden thing that he sort of just chucked into the mix? Yeah,
that I think that came out from speaking to players.
Great.
More than him. I think that was a kind of, so what's he like? Oh, well, I'll tell you what he's like.
Well, we're not allowed ketchup, so.
But yeah, I mean, the Di Canio one that stands out was the end of the season. I think it was Spurs. Was it Spurs at the end of a season where he just went for them? It was after the Phil Bardsley casino thing, I think. It was kind of around that time. And I just remember sitting in a press conference. I think it was the last day of the season, or maybe the penultimate game of the season. And it was just a very kind of anodyne question about the summer. And he basically just said, right, well, I'll be getting rid of half of them. Half of them aren't good enough. Half of them don't care, this, that, and the other. And you thought, oh, my heck. Yeah, this is going to go down well on the team bus on the way home.
Yeah, crikey, it's just it's amazing how many sort of colourful or colourless characters you just sort of get in the game. I imagine. I'm no journalist. I imagine from a journalist's point of view, it's just a very do you ever get the impression that every time a new manager's appointed, whether it be Sunderland, Newcastle, or Borough, do you ever get the impression that you just don't know what's going to happen next? That you're not entirely sure what's in store.
You do with some. Again, it varies. Some, like say a Moyes, you've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to be like from the next 12 months. And you speak to people who've covered them at other clubs, and you're always, your heart sinks a bit when they say, "Oh yeah, you won't. You're going to struggle."
All the best.
Yeah. But then you're right. There are others that surprise you, or that you don't really know what you're going to get until you're in there and see.
Tony Pulis. I don't know how he would be. Would he be sort of like dour and quite reserved? Or
I mean, to be honest,
snappy.
I thought he'd be better from a work point of view than he was, really, because for all that his football might be dour or whatever, he's been in the game for that long that you thought that he'd be like a McCarthy or like a Bruce, and he wasn't really like that. And as you'll know, he has this really annoying thing of standing up doing his press conferences, and then halfway through when he decides, right, that's it, that's the last question, and he just walks out. So it's like, right, okay.
I always got the impression watching one of his press conferences that he just never wanted to be there.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right, yeah. And he didn't really try to hide it very much either, I don't think. So, what it used to be that, sometimes in the Championship you'll get a run of a load of matches together. So, they might be playing Saturday and then Tuesday, and so they won't do a kind of press conference before the Tuesday. So you do your press conference after the game, and then you're thinking, right, I need to get some questions about whoever they're playing on Tuesday night. Oh, no, he just starts walking off. No, I can't even think about that. Great, brilliant. Cheers, Tony.
It's just not, I think, if you're a fan or a covering journalist, you just don't want to hear that.
Yeah, well, that's it.
That game in 40's time, I've not thought about that.
Yeah, that's it. And coupled by the fact that covering Borough this season has been a slog in terms of the football. Blow my neck. It's yes, it's not been great. Even when they were kind of sitting second in the first half of the season, it at no stage felt like a kind of, you were covering a club in a promotion push and everyone was getting excited. It certainly wasn't like that.
No, well, I suppose as a parting question, how do you ever think that in your remaining years as a journalist that you will live to see Steve McLaren win some form of domestic honour with the club again?
Well, what about an FA Vase or an FA Trophy? He might end up somewhere like that eventually. Oh, God, to be fair, he's been there was talk of him being like a consultant or something at Darlington, so maybe he'll take Darlington to Wembley in the FA Vase, or if they ever got back there, the conference playoff or something, and maybe that'll be it for him.
This is how I've done it. Don't do it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got this image of like Steve McLaren with an on-brand Darlington brolly.
Yes.
Watching over the FA Vase with about 5,000 people there, losing 2-1 to Braintree. Oh.
Yeah. That's what it'll be, but his hair will just be in place, won't it?
just in place.
Dangling in the wind.
Little hair island.
Yeah.
That's the part we've got for the Athletic.
We're going on the Bob Mortimer route, exactly.
I think Steve McLaren's well covered on another popular podcast.
Hey, Casper, we're off to Darlington with my hair island. I can't go down that route, otherwise I'll just get carried away. I've had many times in the pub where everyone's jumping into like a Beardsley sketch bag.
Yes.
Not only am I not only is that not on task, but I'm not as funny as Bob Mortimer, and I couldn't even attempt to emulate that.
Don't put yourself down, mate. Not many are.
That's true. That's true. Anyway, I think that's a good place to leave it. So we'll just do a little round table before we go. Looking ahead to the game at Wembley, we're going to start with you, Josh. Mm-hmm. Do you want to give us a prediction? Give us a very brief rundown of how the game will go and give me your score.
Oh, strong Sunderland first half. 1-0 up at half time. Dodgy half an hour, 1-1, 15 minutes to go. Late winner, 2-1.
From who?
From Maguire. Steps up again.
Who scores the first?
Oh, I'm going to go for Catamol.
Decent. What about you, Morgan?
Every time I predict a Sunderland result in a massive game, it goes wrong. So I'm either going to, I'll give you an option, I'm going to abstain, or I'm going to say 7-0 Charlton.
You can abstain.
Yes,
I think
that's what we'll agree on, because I think every time I've predicted a positive result, it never goes that way.
No, well, I mean,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the attempt at reverse psychology, but I'm not letting you say 7-0 on a Sunderland podcast. I hope you'll understand.
Well, then we'll just edit that bit out and I'll abstain.
Yeah, fair enough. Hope you get that, Sean. Right.
Right.
Do you want to get a prediction, Scott?
Yeah, I'll go. Lyle Taylor scores for Charlton in about 15 minutes. 1-0 Charlton. 1-0 at half-time. Sunderland equalise 51. Maguire. Sunderland take the lead 57. Someone like Morgan, if he's playing.
Mm-hmm.
Charlton equalise with about 3 minutes left. Header from a corner. 2-2. Extra time. 3-3 at the end of extra time. Sunderland win on penalties. That's the way to do it, isn't it?
Not really.
With Lee Cattermole scoring the winning penalty. What could be better?
Oh God, imagine if you're like an employee at the Sunderland till at full 73. Right
Yeah,
now.
exactly, yeah.
Crikey, that would be glorious. But
all joking aside, though, I can see extra time and penalties.
I can
See it a million miles off.
I don't think it'll be that dramatic, though. I think how it's going to go is that we're going to get an early goal. I think we're going to start really brightly. We're going to go out all guns blazing and we're going to really just run at the Charlton defence. And I think Lewis Morgan's going to get the first goal. So that's 1-0, I think, in about 12 minutes. I think it'll be like really just like, they'll start well, they'll get the goal, and then they'll be decent for the rest of the first half. Not as good, but decent. They'll start the second, and it'll be like against Portsmouth in the checker trade where they'll start and like Charlton will have the upper hand and they'll have the momentum, and then we'll get pinned back. And we'll be sort of clenching our teeth thinking, oh, can we hold out here? Can we not? We'll get to 75 minutes and Lyle Taylor, 1-1. I think through a fairly well-worked goal, but a goal that we still think we could have done better with.
Yeah.
I think it'd be something like that. We're getting very specific here.
We are.
We're going to go to extra time and we're still going to be up against it. We're going to be up against it for the rest of extra time. We're going to look like they're the better team. We're going to get to 125 minutes and we are going to get a goal from nowhere from Lyndon Gooch.
No, that would do.
He's going to come on as the impact of run at the defence and get the goal.
In his defensive wing role.
In his defensive winger role.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then does he instantly take it to the corner? Because he was brilliant at that against Portsmouth.
He was actually,
and they will absolutely just like they will just absolutely be ridiculous with the time waste till the end of the game. It'll rile Charlton up. We'll be halfway between cheering and laughing by the end of it while we celebrate promotion to the Championship. That's how we'll do it.
It might happen.
That will do.
That's not how it's going. That's not a prediction. That is a premonition. That is how it's going to go.
Is it just me that thinks it's a bit surreal that we might actually get promoted? Because I had a few weeks where I was like, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. It's
do you know
kind
what I mean?
of...
I think everyone's been so focused on sort of what's been happening and the kind of fluctuation in results and performances that we've kind of taken our eye off what does it all mean? That's how it feels to me anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's been it's felt like there's been so long as well where you've been looking at other results and thinking if they do this and that with all the games in hand, if they win the games in hand and blah, 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 you know, for it to actually come down to the clarity of one match, win it or don't win it, it's actually... It kind of focuses the mind, doesn't it? In a way that it hasn't really happened for a little while this season.
I fear for my mental state when I'm walking up Wembley Way because I don't know about you lads, but I was nervous at the checker trade. God, I can't imagine what that's going to be like.
I can't wait though.
Oh, absolutely not. No, it's as they say, the hope you can't stand.
Can I just one thing from me, Alex, before we're cut off? Just to say the fans, I think the fans deserve a massive shout, really, for the way they've supported this year, home and away, breaking, attendance records and the way they've supported away from home as well. 1,300 was there at Portsmouth Thursday night.
Yeah.
Daft round trip, 6-7 days.
No, it has. It's been, there's been some ridiculous games this season, hasn't there? Blackpool being the obvious one where it just felt incredible, kind of seeing all that going on around you. But even a lot of the the sold out AFC Wimbledons and those kind of days really you remember as well because it's no, you're absolutely right. The following home and away this season has been extraordinary in League One.
It's tremendous. Yeah, the fans are an absolute credit to the club, and only we're going to take one last trip down Cliche Street, and I'm going to say that. I finally feel like the fans once again are reflected by the club's attitude. Yeah, I think we've got a great committed team. We've got a great set of fans where we've got a loyal following that is just reinforced by a loyal, hard-working and talented team on the pitch. And that is precisely why we are going to win promotion to the Championship in the most romantically poetic fashion. So that's just my 2 pence worth. Hopefully We're all in agreement there. Yeah?
Yeah.
How are the lads?
Got a few nods there, by the way. That
We're
wasn't just like an
all
awkward silence. There were some nice nods.
He didn't.
Some nice nods around the studio. But yeah, so that, we'll leave it on that note. Hopefully the next time we are on the podcast, we are going absolutely ballistic because we are in the Championship. But regardless, we will be here anyway. So thank you very much for tuning in, and it has been a pleasure as always. How are the lads?
Some exchange betting companies run short-lived promotions, like months-long offers of low commission. At BetDAG, we wanted to change the way we did things, so we set our commission at 2% permanently. That's 2% on football, horse racing, golf, almost any sport. 2%. That's just one way that BetDAG is changing for the better. For the better, like you. BetDAG, the 2% commission exchange.
Over 18s only, please gamble responsibly.